5,011 days. That is how long it's been since the bug-eating, meth-addict Nebraska Cornhuskers beat the University of Colorado.
Welcome to the Folsom Frenzy podcast. My name is Jake. I'm here with Chase, Topher, and Sreyas is joining us here in a bit. It's good to be back, boys. We got all four of us back in the podcast. I don't know where Sam is. Sam might be joining later too. We'll see. He's kind of a wild card, but excited to be back. We have a great agenda for you all listening. We're going to give our season predictions, our win-loss predictions for the Buffs. We're going to talk about the best position groups, worst position groups, who we think will be the surprise players, the breakout players, overall thoughts for the offseason, and kind of talk about the schedule a little bit more, our hardest game, easiest game, that sort of thing. So stick with us. It's going to be a fun one. It's good to be back. And while you're listening, if you could subscribe to our page on YouTube, like the page, comment, we'd really appreciate it. We're really trying to grow our YouTube presence, so we would really appreciate that. Also, subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Follow us on X. Follow us wherever you can find us, but mainly YouTube is what we're pushing. But we're excited to be back. Chase, Topher, what have you guys been up to? Let's just shoot the shit.
Yeah. Well, we did do, so we haven't been making a lot of content on this channel. We've been pretty active on X as we normally are, but we have been on a bunch of other podcasts as guests, which will be cool in that hopefully they'll come back. They've agreed to come back on our show. The guys over at Cincinnati, K-State, Texas Tech, who will come on and do a preview for us when those games are upcoming. So, we're excited to be back in the Big 12. But it was kind of cool to talk to those guys and get kind of the perspective going into this next season in the Big 12 and a big change year for the Buffs. Personal life, I think we're all working. It's pretty boring, not exciting. Sreyas is out there sending rockets into space, which is probably cooler than anything else we're doing. But, just because we've not been as active on YouTube or, X, anything like that, we've been spreading the good word. The gospel of the University of Colorado has been out there, hyping us up, letting people know that this is not a team. There's a lot of talk about Colorado. There always has been. But as you'll see in our predictions, we think we're going to be, a little sneaky this year and better than people expect. So we've been making sure that the other Big 12 teams know.
Absolutely. And this summer, I got a ring. I got married. And so I think it's going to be an auspicious year for the Buffs as well. I got one. I think they're coming for one too. Whether it's a Big 12 or a Natty, I don't know.
Both. Or both. You don't have to pick one or the other.
Or both.
Sreyas, your mic's having some issues.
I knew it. It always happens. All right, stand by.
We can hear you now.
Oh, wait, you can hear me now?
We'll leave this in.
Welcome back.
All right. You know what? This is super fitting. After all the issues last year with the smoke alarm, and I think when I was in the hotel in New Jersey, like every other weird technical issue that's happened, but, well, it's fitting because I'm back finally too. It's been kind of a rough year for me. You guys sounds like you guys have had some good years. It's been kind of rough on my side, been dealing with a lot of family health stuff, but as far as family health stuff is concerned, it really could be a lot worse, and I'm thankful that it's almost football season to have a nice distraction from it. So should be good. Super stoked to be back.
Good to have you back, Sreyas. It's been a while. It's good to get the whole crew together.
Yeah, it is.
But yeah, let's talk Buffs. Let's talk off-season briefly, and then we'll go into the upcoming season, go through predictions and how we're feeling about the team. But just to talk about the off-season, we've had Big 12 Media Day, CU Media Day as well, and a lot's been going on, a little recruiting buzz. So guys, where do you want to start? Anything that comes to mind? What's on your guys' hearts?
I think the elephant in the room is potentially the quarterback of the future. Lots of smoke. Juju. We want Juju. We've made it clear that we want Juju. It'll be one of the better days as a Buff in my life if Juju commits. But maybe this is a hot take, and I'll just get us moving with them. But I don't think it's the end of the world if he doesn't commit. I think we're going to be just fine. If Colorado has to go into the transfer portal and go find a quarterback next year, assuming Coach Prime stays with us, I think we're going to be okay. But boy, the opportunity to land a player like Juju, USC's out there already recruiting another quarterback in that class. Pretty exciting that, that think about where we were 2 years, when we first started this podcast and we weren't even sure if Travis Hunter was going to follow Coach Prime. And now here we are thinking, oh my God, maybe we could get Juju, who before getting connected to Colorado was ranked a lot higher. And then all of a sudden, his ranking keeps getting dropped, which is like just absolutely classic. But that's the big thing for me in the offseason is hoping that gets official. Still hasn't happened yet. We'll see, I guess. But that's been the thing that I've been most excited about. I'm tired of the Coach Prime controversies. When we were guest starring on the other podcast, I mentioned I was like, I just can't be bothered with it anymore. It's ridiculous. The hate is unbelievable. I'm over it. So trying to have a more positive offseason and following the Juju has been kind of my big focus.
For me, it's got to be the offensive line and the reports that we've heard about them being very close with Shedeur. I brought this up on past podcasts, but there were a couple plays. There's one, I don't remember exactly when it happened. It must have been the first or second quarter against Arizona when Shedeur got sacked on third down and the whole offensive line was already off the field and Shedeur had to pick himself up and walk off the field. And that left such a bad taste in my mouth. I might have a video of it somewhere from sitting in the stands. It was just so bad. And you could tell that there was issues there. I don't know. It's hard to even put my finger on why. Some of us have talked about this before, but there was a lot more continuity on the offensive line between the 2022 team and the 2023 team. And I wonder what was going on there that, precipitated that type of reaction. But I mean, normally you want to hear that I remember Philip Lindsay, obviously he wasn't a quarterback, but I remember when he brought the whole offensive line to his press conference after the ASU win in 2016. And I remember how positive that felt to know that one of your leaders, like him and Cepho, obviously the two biggest leaders on the offense that season, one of them would go out of their way to recognize a position group that had been struggling maybe not historically, but during the struggles of CU since 2006. And that's even with NFL talent. So finally seeing that there's signs of the gelling together. And I think Joel Klatt recently brought this up. If they're even marginal, they don't have to be good or even great. If they're marginal, they just can't give up 52 sacks. I know there's all the talk about Shedeur holding onto the ball too long. Man, that wasn't entirely the problem. I'm sure that was a contributor, but that's the offensive line was just a sieve against certain teams, especially teams with good defensive linemen like Latu on UCLA. So all eyes on that for me. That alone would be enough to get us into a bowl conversation, which is what I'm expecting to be in a bowl conversation this year. And frankly, it would be a welcome sight to allow Shedeur to actually cook and show everyone his actual true capabilities heading into a NFL draft where he might be a top 10 pick.
Yeah. I want to talk about the bowl conversation piece, but before I do, just talking the offseason, the only topic that's not ball related I'll bring up is the hate pieces that have come out against this team all offseason. We got to talk on it briefly here.
I just said I was ignoring it. I wasn't
so bad.
Yeah, we'll talk about it briefly here, but you have that huge Athlon Sport hate piece of the CU team strapped with guns, but really it meant strapped as in good man coverage, but that guy just doesn't know lingo at all. And then you have the Denver Post, Sean Keeler, just spewing hate about CU for the last 20 years. For people that don't even know the context, this isn't new. That guy's hated CU for the last 20 years. I don't know how long he's been in Colorado. He's not a native, but the Denver Post hasn't liked CU.
They haven't liked anyone that isn't the Denver Broncos.
Exactly. Same thing with the Denver media. Altitude 2 doesn't know what they're talking about. But he's always hated CU, so I kind of like seeing him be put in his place. I don't know what your guys' thoughts were on that whole thing.
Keeler. It's clear what he's doing. I mean, we all know what he's doing, right? I mean, the way that this whole enterprise works is it's all based on ad revenue. And how do you get ad revenue without having eyeballs, right? And that's what they're all using Colorado for this. I mean, we've seen big accounts across the entire, not even just college football. We saw the PGA Tour post a darts only video with Rory McIlroy. They're all doing it because they know that it drives up their engagement, which is exactly what they want. And at this point, like I don't even care. Like, I respect the hustle. I think I retweeted that from our account, just being like, just straight up, this is funny. They're using the Colorado program for engagement, and I don't like, from my perspective, it seems like from our perspective, at least, I wouldn't consider us to be insiders, right? We have friends who are involved with the program, but we're not true insiders. But from my view of the program, it seems like their GPAs have been like at an all-time high. It seems like we haven't dealt with some of the legal issues that we've seen. My goodness, do we remember some of those, like stuff with Josh Tupou and stuff with Joe Tumpkin and stuff from the 2016 season? That was bad. Like,
It was
that was
really bad.
really, really rough. It was really bad. And with where we're at, like, we haven't seen those types of things happening. It seems to be a much cleaner program. So like, all the other noise is just like noise to me, I just don't want to see any of the legal stuff happening and whatnot. As far as the media is concerned, though, like that's just what they're gonna do. I know one of our I saw the post. Was it Jake that posted it with like, what do these journalists have in common? I mean, yeah, and we called out one of our old like Folsom Frenzy folks who's now gone on to be, but that's what they do. That's what they do. I saw it. I had to laugh at it. I'm sure Jake didn't appreciate it very much, but hey, like, come on, dude, own it. That's what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You're being edgy. Like, I know. So I see Jake at CU games still. Like, I run into him every now and again, and I get along with him great. I don't know.
This isn't me, Jake, for clarification for the listener.
And all 15 subscribers for the Denver Post are, I'm sure, just loving everything that he's posting, but not Jake, but Keeler. And it's just like being negative just gets so much more press. And Coach Prime is, I mean, anyone that like objectively just listens to Coach Prime and doesn't just hate him because of who he is should be able to look and see that he's the kind of guy that you would want coaching your kids, right? Like, he's the kind of guy that I would want instilling values in my kids. And so when people are so negative for no reason at all other than the fact that it gets clicks, it's frustrating, and I'm tired of it. And it's one of those things where like, it's tired. Like, you've done it. And for a year, it was like, wow, people are talking about Colorado, love us or hate us, at least you're talking about us. And now it's like, it's just corny. And the athlon was maybe the best example of that, where it's just so patently false. And I don't think they've even withdrawn it. Like, they just left it out there and they're just letting it sit because it gets them talked about. And frankly, that's a website that I hadn't even heard of before that. So like, that good on them. Like, congratulations, you did it. But it's just ridiculous. And anyone listening to this podcast is going to agree with us. And frankly, when we did the little tour around of all the other Big 12 podcasts, they agreed. They were like, yeah, the hate, it's kind of boring. We're tired of hearing of it. I understand where they're coming from as far as, Colorado's been in our face nonstop. We're tired of it, but they're also tired of, seeing all the hate and all the negativity, which really just isn't deserved. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's move on. Let's talk ball. Just had to cover that topic because it's been such a big topic in the off season. Let's talk ball. Let's talk win-loss predictions, guys. Let's get right to it. I think Topher has to leave us here in a bit, so I just want to dive right in. I'm going to share my screen. If you're watching on YouTube, it's the best way to watch. Again, we're trying to blow up the YouTube, so check it out. Let me share my screen. We're going to go just game by game here, and we're going to go win-loss predictions. So what we did here is each of us filled out our win-loss predictions for the Buffs game by game before this podcast. And we're going to, just go game by game, starting with our overall win predictions. So just to expand this here, if you take the average of all of our win-losses, rounding up, very important caveat, we're saying the Buffs will win 11 games this year.
Are you sure you did that math
rounding
right?
up, rounding up.
Is
You'll
disturbing
see.
because I know
there is no
way.
You got to double check
You'll
your
see.
averages.
Are you an accountant or what?
You'll see. Well, bear with me.
I think I'm the most optimistic.
Jake put us
bear
in
with
at
me.
15 wins this year.
Hold up. Yeah, I guess that's true. I guess someone
This
could have
is
taken
rounding
us.
up. You'll
Oh,
see
yeah.
why. But I'm going to break it down by each person, how many wins, losses we each predicted for the season overall. And then again, we'll go game by game. Starting with Topher, coming in at 9 wins. Topher, why are you bullish on the Buffs? Is that bullish? I don't know. Unpack that for us real quick.
Yeah, I think we're going to start strong. I think our depth has been drastically improved. I think we have one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in the nation, and we are absolutely dangerous on the offensive side of the ball. Based on the well-off media, I think the weakest area that we have is our linebacking core, right? And that worries me a little bit, but that means our biggest weakness is probably going to be defending the run. And I'm not going to lie, if we have Shador that's able to stand up with one of the deepest wide receiver rooms, we're going to be explosive. You're not going to be able to keep up with us, no matter how good your run game is. Okay. So with that, I think we start off strong. Let me go through what I actually put
Well,
down
I think we'll
here.
break
So-
down game by game in just a
Oh.
second. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but yeah, I think we can start off strong. We get into a couple of tough games, but towards the end, I think we bounce back. We learn how to face adversity. We have a lot of growth as a team, and I think we really put together a spectacular season towards the end. That's why I'm bullish on the Buffs. I think we're going to have the best quarterback in every single game, and that always gives us a chance.
Love it. Gonna keep going down the line here. Coming up next, we have Sreyas at 7 wins. Going from bullish to bearish, maybe? I don't know.
So
I'm
here's
having
the
a hard
thing.
time getting to 11 average, by the way. Just looking at these
Already,
numbers
I'm
thus
already,
far.
unless, yeah. I
I'm
think
netting.
we-
I'm netting the wins. You'll see.
oh boy. I don't. So here's the thing: 7 wins for me, and I know I predicted 8 last year. So notwithstanding that, I looked at the schedule and it's not as tough as last year, admittedly. Like last 2 years, it was like top 10 in the country in terms of strength of schedule. So we're not looking at something of that nature, but there's a lot of parity in the Big 12 right now. There's a lot of parity. And like on paper, our top level talent is fantastic. Like it's super good, especially in offense. Man, like those first stringers, all of our wide receiving core, Shador, those first string offensive linemen on paper look good. The Dallin Hayden at running back, like it's a good looking team on paper. As Topher pointed out, like as far as like defense, like front seven's a little concerning, that type of deal. So depth, though, I am very worried. I do agree with Topher that we're going to start off strong, but I do kind of worry about how we're going to look in November. And our November schedule features some pretty tough teams like Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. I think that we will take one of those 3. Right now, I have my money on the season closer and end the season on a really high note against Oklahoma State, but I do suspect like some of these road games in really hot environments like UCF and Tucson against Arizona, against some pretty good teams. UCF should be better. We might struggle a little bit. And I know a lot of their team is from Florida too. So maybe I'm overplaying that, but I would be happy. Like personally, I know no one else would be happy with Coach Prime would, absolutely hate 7 wins, but I'd be happy with it. Like that's a sign of market progress. That's kind of what Arizona did, right? They went from a 1-win team to winning 5, I believe, and then they won 9 or 10 last year, actually, after the bowl game. And then now they have higher hopes. So I'd be happy with that trajectory personally.
All right. Next up is Chase. 8 wins.
Yeah,
Chase, how are you feeling about the Buffs overall?
So I was waffling between 7 and 8. And last season I was the Debbie Downer of the group, and turns out I was not as pessimistic as I needed to be. But I was just pessimistic in the wrong way. We started off super hot and I was like, wow, I'm an idiot. And then it ended up even worse than I ever imagined. So, looking at it this year, completely agree with Sreyas. This is a much easier conference as far as last year. It was a pretty good year for the Pac-12. All things considered, Pac-12 ended on a nice note. This Big 12 is not as deep, not as good, but I think some teams are sneaky. I think games are going to play more to Colorado's forte, maybe. Colorado is better suited to compete in this conference, especially when I feel like we're going to be weaker on the lines. My big concern is depth. I think we have kind of a nightmare schedule, frankly, towards the end. I also, the win or loss that I really was waffling on is North Dakota State. I would not be surprised if we lose that game. Horrible game to schedule. It is nightmare fuel. I've already talked about it before, but on a Thursday night, like just really, really bad scheduling on the athletic department's side. But even if we lose that game, I don't think everything's lost. That's a very talented team. That is a team that is built the exact opposite way of Colorado. That is guys that are brought in as freshmen, that are developed there, and they succeed there. And we're a team of transfers at the end of the day. So, looking at those games, I think there's a lot of coin toss games out there. We've got some sneaky tough games as well with like Arizona, Kansas at Kansas City is going to be kind of Kansas is going to be good this year. I think, they're ranked in the top 25, which is a crazy thing to say out loud. But at the end of the day, like Sreyas said, on top end talent, we are better than any team we're going to play this season. Period. Amen. I really do believe that. I think the guys that can do well if they stay healthy will keep us in every game. Anytime Travis Hunter's on the football field, he's the best player there. Doesn't matter who we play. We can play Alabama. He will still be the best player on the football field. It's just a matter of, can we stay healthy? Can we mix up, the guys? And what is the cohesion going to look like on those lines? And to Sreyas' point earlier, it really matters. And I think we've made a huge improvement, but they got to prove it to me. I'm just not going to keep believing it just because I see the stars transferring in.
All right. And last but not least, myself, Chase, I agree. I'm right around 8 wins. And
how did you get that average?
How did the averages come to 11?
I did it line by line. Okay, it wasn't the best average. The real average is 8.
Accountant.
I'm just trying to go for clickbait, guys. I'm trying to take a page out of Sean Keeler's book, okay? Like and subscribe. Okay. 8 wins for me. That averages to 11, obviously. So
give your degree back, dude.
Yeah. Our AAU accreditation is slowly slipping away. The Big Ten invite being pulled.
So my Big Ten dreams are gone. Okay, 8 wins. Yeah, I see it as we improved every position group except maybe running back, which we can talk about in a bit here. But you have 2 of the best players in college football on your team in Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders is the best quarterback in college football. I will die on that hill. Travis Hunter is the best. I'll call him the best athlete in college football. And when you have both of those guys, you have the best player on offense and the best player on defense. That automatically makes you in the top quadrant of the Big 12, in my opinion. And then the offensive line, Sreyas, you alluded to it. Joel Klatt said the Buffs were sacked. How many times last year? Like 50? He's like, if they cut that in half to 25, that's still bad. But they're going to be a lot better, right? They're going to be a lot better than a 4-win team. And a lot of those losses were how many? I think every loss except for 2 was 1 possession. So just putting all the puzzle pieces together, I'm seeing about 8 wins. But let's break it down, go game by game here, starting with North Dakota State. Did one of us say a loss? Let's break this down here. So North Dakota State, all 4 of us have wins for North Dakota State. Obviously a very tough matchup, guys. Do you have any thoughts briefly on the North Dakota State matchup week 1 in Folsom?
Terrifying. We all agree on that. I think we've beat this to death on past podcasts. Horrible scheduling.
South Dakota State has beat the hell out of North Dakota. They're not the same program that they have been in the past.
It doesn't matter. It's one of those where you aren't prepared and then you get stunned. Like this has everything. The hype for Colorado is huge. Everything about a huge letdown, deflating your tires loss that derails your entire season. That's what this is. And that's why it's so scary. And if we win, it doesn't matter because everyone's going to go, of course you won. It's North Dakota State.
Here's the beauty of the new model for college football, though. I've said this before, too. It's non-conference games are kind of warm-up games. In theory, you can use those games to kind of get your people ready to go. I don't think Prime's going to view it that way because we got 2 rivals, and then we got an FCS powerhouse. So that's tough. You're going to have to show up pretty well. But man, like if you're using those games, you stay healthy through those games. Like even if you don't end up winning all of them, you still got 9-game conference schedule to attack. And man, if you show up and you win the conference games that you're supposed to win, you're right there at the conversation for the playoff because of the way that it works now.
And to Topher's credit, really quick, I don't want to play South Dakota State either. Please don't schedule them just because Topher's trying to inspire you. I just think that is like a lose-lose game, and I hate that.
If Rick George is watching this, give us South Dakota State.
If you're gonna schedule, good fan of the podcast, Rick George. If you're gonna schedule a cupcake, schedule an actual cupcake. Like I would love to see you.
Northern Colorado
schedule. Northern Colorado's welcome anytime in Boulder. Cal, is another cupcake that I'd love to see on the. I'm just kidding. But like it's so stupid, and it can only end in pain. And I think it's because we're Colorado fans and we expect it. But I would not be remotely surprised if we lost that game by 40 points. Like it would make so much sense.
40.
I'm not saying I expect it. I'm not saying I
40.
expect it. I'm just saying that
that's
my
a
life as a
banner.
Colorado
That's going on the
fan-
banner.
Oh
yeah, my life-
gosh, dude.
maybe we clip that and make that the intro to the episode as your cupcake. But like it is a nightmare game and I hate it so much. And that's why very quickly on credit, I'm going to give this. This episode sponsored by Q Wealth Management. Go to qwealthmanagement.com to learn more. They're going to re-up our Twitter premium or whatever it's called now subscription. So wanted to make sure we worked it in, even though they haven't officially 100% agreed to keep us on. So, but yeah, I don't know. I want to vomit in my mouth. I think I'm ready to move on to the next game. Thinking about it gives me the hives. It is so bad. And everyone should be healthy, but like, who knows? I could see 10 sacks happening in that game and something horrible happening, like an injury, and then the entire season's over. And I, delete my TV subscription and dig myself into a hole. Like it's a nightmare.
All right.
New Colorado fans have to understand. We've seen this happen before. Like we have physically been at
You
games
can't hurt
where
me.
we've lost to FCS.
You can't hurt me anymore.
I'll never forget that Sacramento State game.
It will hurt. I would just to be fair.
It'll hurt.
And I don't care if we're winning by 40 points at halftime. I won't believe it until it says 0. Like genuinely, because there's been games where I was like, this is what Oregon State, the worst team in college football that year. And then they come back. I mean, I just don't, whatever. It's whatever.
This is what's unique about our podcast. You got podcasts that are like Coach Prime fans and they're really bullish. You got DMVR that's also very bullish. Us, we're praying we beat North Dakota State. I'll be the voice of reason. I think we're going to beat these guys by 28. I think we're going to be, it'll be a slow start and then we'll crush them in the second half. Moving on, North Dakota State, we're going to eat them for breakfast. Also, one more point. I don't love how Buff fans are making fun of North Dakota State. Like they posted that kind of cheesy video and Buff fans ate that up. I think it's more the newer Buff fans, but they don't know that being a CU fan, you can't jinx anything. But moving on.
We're so PTSD. We have so much PTSD.
We do.
Before you show the next one, quick raise of hands between Sreyas, Topher, and I. Who thinks Jake picked Nebraska to win this next game? Obviously, everyone does. Yeah. So let's see it, Jake. Go ahead and just show it to us. Jake's favorite football team in the world. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Is that not the most predictable outcome?
For those of you listening, there was one voted loss for Nebraska.
It's crazy how it was only up
Jake.
there for 1 second and then he took it down. And I'm going to go find the screenshot. I'm going to make it the thumbnail for the video. But
oh, man. All right. I got to explain myself because I'm on the hot seat now. This was kind of a personal pick for me. Okay. So, yeah, the backstory for folks listening, if you haven't been a longtime fan, I'm married to a Cornhusker. Her dad has season tickets. Her whole family's big Husker fans. They live out in Nebraska. So that's why this group gives me so much crap. But I picked this. This was the only personal pick I made. And why I made this pick is because I'm going out to Lincoln. I'm going to be sitting in the Nebraska section by all of my in-laws. And I just can't wait for the Buffs to lose and just be sad again because I am so used to the Buffs letting me down. And that's why I put a loss. But more so, let me unpack this a little bit more. Memorial Stadium is going to be packed. It's over 100,000 people. Maybe, is it over 100? I think it's a little bit less.
It's just under.
Nebraska has really talented offensive and defensive lines. Yes, they have a freshman quarterback. Yes, he's going to struggle. It's his second game against a real good football team. I think the Buffs are a really good team. I'm just nervous going into that road environment. We beat him 3 games in a row. This rivalry is heated. Do you not think that Nebraska is going to be pissed playing us? CU, I think, is more focused on the Colorado State rivalry, just based on how that game went last year. I think we might overlook Nebraska a tiny bit, and Nebraska is going to be hungry, especially Matt Rule. I think he's going to be hungry to get a win. And it's just so hard for me to get around beating Nebraska 4 times in a row. I don't know. I'm just like jaded and I want the Buffs to win. I really do. We'll see. I think it's going to be a close game and I definitely think I could be wrong. I was wrong last year. I was the only person that picked a loss and I was so glad to be wrong. Guys, bring it on. Blast me. What do you think?
You did a smart thing by picking them because you picked them to lose last year. and they won. So you got to
Exactly.
stick with it. You got to stick with
Exactly.
it. So I respect it.
I almost
Yeah.
switched from like, they're gonna lose when I'm out there. I know
Yeah.
it.
All right.
Everyone's comparing Raiola to Patrick Mahomes already. We'll see how that turns out. Patrick Mahomes has a
5,000
lot of mobility.
5,011 days. That is how long it's been since the bug eating, meth addict Nebraska Cornhuskers beat the University of Colorado. I'm pretty sure Tyler Hansen was our quarterback back then, or someone like stupid, but it's not going to happen. I'm not going to say it like I did Colorado State because I almost had to eat my foot, but Matt Rule is a moron. That entire team is dog water. We absolutely boat raced them last year. People forget that. The fact that the score looked even remotely close was because of two pity party touchdowns by Nebraska at the end that their fans unironically celebrated
Against our fourth strings.
against our fourth strings. That was the game that turned me into a believer last season. And then we saw the Colorado State game and I went, uh-oh, this team's in trouble. Nebraska is not as good. I've seen it before. I've seen Texas A&M ranked in the top 25 and I've seen Nebraska ranked in the top 25. And I don't believe either of them. Nebraska's not ranked this year, but Nebraska's a total pretender. Matt Rule has a huge job in front of him. That team is not that much better. It's going to be tough to go into Memorial Stadium. I could see it being a loss. I just don't see it. Like, it's just Colorado is more talented than them everywhere. I think our secondary is going to eat them alive. The question comes down to, is our line going to be able to hold up against the run and prevent them from getting 8 yards a carry? And that's where I have to just trust our guy Warren Sapp to lock it down. And I think we're gonna I wanted to put that down as a loss because I want to set myself up for lower expectations, but I just don't see it. I think we are more talented than that team. I think Nebraska is worse than people realize. And if I'm wrong, so be it. But I don't know. I hate them so much. And the fact that Jake said that he's gonna be sitting in the Nebraska section, probably wearing red to support his wife. It makes me ill. It makes me ill. And I just want to point out that no one else in this group married someone from the University of Nebraska. So it really isn't that hard. But alas, I'll get off my high horse. But I don't know. I think we're better than that team, and I hope we prove it.
And for the record, my wife knows probably at least 5 CU players, and she doesn't know any Nebraska players. So there we go.
There you go.
He's converting her.
Yeah.
He's converting her.
Slowly.
My wife will literally say I'd rather be dead than red. So very proud of her.
Beautiful.
I think like Trey said, we dog walked them last year, and it was a total win in every facet of the game. And one of the biggest issues is they had a quarterback that was turnover prone. Do I think Matt Raiola is going to have those same turnover issues? Probably not. But that still doesn't fix the fact that Shedeur was able to throw all over your secondary. Still doesn't fix the fact that even with your superior O-line and run game, you really didn't do much against our subpar D-line last year. I just didn't see the recruiting prowess that the CU has had this last year at Nebraska to make a huge jump. So I'm with Chase. I think this is going to be a closer game, but I think it's going to be very clear that Colorado's the superior team at the end of the day.
The one caution I'll give you guys, though, is they don't have Jeff Sims anymore. That individually is a huge net positive for Nebraska. I mean, he had 4 turnovers, 5 turnovers, multiple fumbles. I remember him just dropping a ball where he didn't even get hit. That was a huge part of what happened, right? It was a pretty close game at halftime, and then just the turnovers piled up, and then we capitalized on them. So I still think that we'll win. I do think that freshman quarterback in his first big environment will probably struggle as long as we do a good job of rattling him, especially early. But yeah, I do get the feeling it's going to be a pretty close game.
Really quickly, Jeff Sims is the only player for another team to have won Colorado Player of the Week or Q Wealth Management Player of the Week or whatever we called it on this podcast. So I want to give him a shout out on that. But yeah, let's hit the next one.
All right, Colorado State. Raise your hand if you think Chase was the only one to give us a loss against Colorado State. 3, 2, 1, go. I'm not raising my hand because I can see the results. Chase did not vote a loss for Colorado State. For those of you listening, we got 4 straight wins across the board for CSU. Guys, what are your thoughts for the CSU game?
The only sellout
Nick
canvas
Alisi,
seats
yeah.
Canvas Stadium will ever have.
Yeah, that's probably true. Nick Alisi and Horton are pretty good, I think. Their quarterback showed a lot of potential last year. He was a gunslinger, so a lot of turnovers, but he has a great arm. And if as long as we shut down Horton, we'll probably be in good shape. But he could potentially keep them in the game. You know, I'll be interested to see what the crowd split's like. I'll be there, planning to be there at least. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what the crowd split is, because I think that just based on my experience, a lot of CSU football fans care more about hating CU than they care about CSU football. So I get the feeling that they'll show up in much larger numbers than some people expect. But we should win. We really, really should win. There's a talent discrepancy now, especially on the front line. Top starters.
I want Colorado to start fast. I think that's a game that we need to start fast and just put our foot on the gas and suffocate them. And I think we can do that. I don't think there's any reason to let them hang around. They could be a dangerous team if they hang around. Same with any of these first teams, right? If you let North Dakota State hang around, you're going to be in trouble. Colorado in all three of these games needs to get the first touchdown on the board, and I think we'll win them all if we can do that.
Yeah, I'm feeling good about it. It's not going to be a close game. CSU is going to be playing with some anger, but they were playing with anger last year. I think the Buffs will be probably playing with more fire than they were last year, just with how heated that game was. It's funny. I feel like the team thinks this is the bigger rivalry in their heads just based on last year, but it's definitely Nebraska. But it should be a fun one. It's going to be tensions are going to be high for this game, but I think we'll beat them down.
I will not be eating my foot if we lose that game, unlike last season.
Redeclared.
Any eating the foot bets, Chase, this year? No? Okay. Shoot. Bummer. All right, let's move on. Next up, Baylor. For those of you listening, we have 4 wins across the board for Baylor. We all think we're going to beat Baylor. It's the homecoming game for the Buffs at home, and it's a wear white theme. Guys, you guys have any thoughts on Baylor?
They better play 4 quarters. You can't have another homecoming game like Stanford or like Oregon State in 2018. Play all 4 quarters. They should be more talented. Baylor was really down last year. I don't see them magically getting better. I don't recall whether they're one of the higher transfer turnover teams to help their talent level. But with where Baylor is right now, we need to take care of business. Like, that's very important for the bowl eligibility conversation.
It is super important. And one thing I want to add is I think this could be a mini trap game. You're coming off those highs of 2 rivalry games with Nebraska and Colorado State, and you're thinking ahead to UCF, which is the game right after Baylor. UCF's going to be a tough game on the road. I think Baylor could be a sneaky trap game, but overall, if they're focused, I think they'll take care of business.
My hot take is that Dave Aranda, their head coach, gets fired after losing to Colorado in an ugly loss. I think that team's bad. That team's only gotten worse. There's really not a light at the end of the tunnel. It's I'm going to steal this from Topher before he can say it. It's Topher's wife's birthday that day, so it's already a blessed day. That it's just not a good team. And to Sreyas' point, that team's not gotten any better. If people aren't paying attention to Baylor, that would be a bad loss for us. Like Sreyas said, that's a must win. I like scheduling it for homecoming because it's a winnable game. I hate the fact that they scheduled homecoming in September, but as far as that goes, I'd rather see a win than an October date. So I don't know. That should be a win. If that's not a win, this team has some serious problems in competing for the Big 12.
Do you guys think that'll be the easiest game on our schedule?
No,
Cincinnati.
Conference game.
Cincinnati. Yep.
Okay. Topher, I know you got to run. I'm not going to show the total win-loss by schedule yet, but are there any games you want to talk to that we didn't get to before you dart?
Yes. When you get to the point where it's a back-to-back loss in my schedule, okay? Just know I think the first opponent is going to be very tough to win on the road because I think they're going to have a good year, and the second opponent is historically good, and I think I've only seen us beat them one time in my lifetime. So
let me quickly flip to this one
is it just
because
Arizona and
you got a loss here.
I do have a loss at Central Florida. Yes. Like you said, playing in the heat is going to be tough. It's a road game. It's tough to win on the road. I think College Football 25 did a great job of like simulating how tough it is to win on the road. But like it is tough to win in those environments. It's not a place we're used to playing. It's a long flight. It's going to be hot. it's a making for, you have 3 very emotional tough games to start, kind of an okay one, and then another tough game. I just think we're going to be tired at that point.
Great.
Yep.
Any other parting thoughts, Topher, before you got a dart? Any other games jump out to you?
Yes. So my sister thought I wouldn't do this, but if the Buffs win a national championship this year, I will get the CU logo tattooed on my ass, and I will have a Folsom Frenzy poll which cheek I'm going to get it on. So
Let's go.
on the record,
Love it.
Okay.
Love
that's
it.
all I got. I hope it happens.
That's for a
I-
natty or
That's
Big
for a
12?
natty.
Come on.
That's for a natty.
Come on. How about playoff
Go for
berth?
6 wins, Topher. Do it.
How
do it-
about a smaller
do it for the
logo for
fans.
playoff berth? Can we go like an inch wide?
We'll talk about adjustments as we get near into the season, but this is my
We're
big
near.
one. If we win a natty, big, and the fans get to choose which cheek.
All right.
Go
Sure,
Buffs. I
yeah,
hope it
that-
happens.
Love
That'd
it.
be sick.
Love it.
You guys have a good one.
All right, later, man.
All right, let's talk UCF. Sreyas, I'm going to come to you first. For those of you listening, both Chase and I have a win for UCF. Sreyas and Topher have a loss. I think UCF's a very tough opponent. Sreyas, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Topher nailed it. That's a tough road environment at the bounce house. Brutal weather that time of year out there. And I do expect that the UCF students and frankly, like the people in the area will be very fired up for this game just because of a lot of the Florida ties on CU's team. And like, obviously we had that back and forth with UCF's rival, Florida State, over the last couple of years. But UCF is definitely improved. Like last year, they just started off slow in their first year in the Power Five, but they had a couple kind of brutal Stanford type losses themselves. I think they lost to Baylor in a very similar Stanford, like in a very similar way that we lost to Stanford, and that kind of derailed their bowl hopes. But they have a lot of talent. They're in a talent-rich area. I fully expect, and I think they did have a lot of transfers in, so I expect that team to be a lot better. Hopefully, I expect that game to be a pretty close game, but I think with all those factors in play, it wouldn't surprise me at all if we lost.
All right, let me give the bull case on the UCF game. This is a team that for whatever reason I've done a weird amount of research on. KJ Jefferson's coming in from Arkansas. People might remember him. He's a stud, but he is also one of the best he's like a Jameis Winston type, where there are games where you're like, oh my God, he is the best college football player I've ever seen. And then there are times where it's like, I can't believe this guy graduated from middle school. Like he makes decisions that are like insane. So I think it's going to be different because he's not going to have necessarily the talent that he had at Arkansas around him. I also think UCF is going to be a borderline home game for Colorado. There are so many Coach Prime fans out here, and it's not that there's Colorado alum. I live in Atlanta now. I have friends down in Orlando. There are so many Coach Prime fans here. There are fans from when he was played with the Falcons. There are fans from when he was at Florida State. There are fans that just like him because he's awesome. And that game is not going to look on TV like a home game because UCF is a bunch of cowards and uses black and gold as we do. But it will be, I think it's actually going to be a pretty close to 50-50 split on fans. I know a lot of Colorado fans are thinking about traveling out for it. Maybe that's a crazy take. Maybe I'll be wrong. I don't think I am. But I think that's a game where KJ Jefferson's going to make that team a lot better. But it depends on which KJ Jefferson we get. And their team is razor thin, probably more thin than Colorado is going into next year. The way they've built it is just they're not going to have any depth. And so if they sustain any injuries before that game, same thing with us, right? But we have to predict as if it's not going to happen. But if they sustain any injuries, that team they can't take it. And so UCF is like the trendy pick in the Big 12. A lot of it's, people think it's like the in vogue, like dark horse candidate in the Big 12. I get it. Bounce house is a hard place to play. I don't know. I think that's a win. I don't think UCF is quite as good as I think people are really hyping him up probably over the top. And I think it really depends on how KJ Jefferson plays, but Shedeur alone could take that game over and win it. And I think we're going to absolutely nuclear annihilate their secondary. And so I think it's gonna be a high scoring game. Everyone talks about the heat. Half of our team is from, Florida, hot, humid environments, right? So I don't see that being as big of a factor as people think it's going to be. Half our team is from Jackson State, right? So I think we're going to hang in there. I think it's going to be a high scoring game. I think it's going to be a stressful game. If Colorado gets any points on that to cover, I'm going to be hammering that line. I love that. I love that game. I think UCF is probably overrated, but I guess we'll see by the time, it's possible they could come into that game 2-2. Excuse me, 2-1. So UCF that is. So we'll see. But I do think that we have a better chance than people realize.
I think you hit the nail on the head. I have nothing else to add other than, are either of you guys going to the game? I know, Sreyas,
No,
you have some friends down there.
I have taken so I'm going with a bunch of my friends who are UCF fans who I used to work with. It's actually a bit of a space rivalry game because CU and UCF are two of the biggest universities for like space related activities. So happen to know a lot of people that went there. So yeah, I'm planning to be there unless something comes up. Personally, that would keep me away, but I'm really looking forward to being there. I've been to that area. I went to a UCF baseball game earlier this year when I was out in the area, so pretty familiar with it. And hopefully we come away with a win and that I'm wrong with this prediction.
Let me reiterate, no fall weddings. I live in Atlanta. I should absolutely be going to this game. Unfortunately, I have friends who are selfish and are having weddings that weekend. No fall weddings. Unbelievable that the only time Colorado is in my time zone this season, I will be in New Jersey of all places at a wedding. But love is beautiful. Can't wait to go. Very excited for Cameron. Unfortunately, have to miss that game.
Oh, pain.
The space rivalry. I like it. We found a new rival in the Big 12.
Mm-hmm. Don't say that. Don't say that. This team does not deserve that.
All right, guys.
Okay.
Moving on. Kansas State. We have 2 losses on the board, 2 wins on the board. 2 losses from Jake and Chase, and 2 wins from Topher and Sreyas. We did a flip here. You can see how my average got so wacky. I rounded up each week for the win-loss. So, yeah, we had a lot of 2 wins at least. So, bad math. But Kansas State, me and Chase. Chase, do you want to open this up or do you want me to? How are we feeling for Kansas State?
Kansas State's a really, really good team. I could have told you exactly how Sreyas' predictions were going to go because Sreyas loves the Buffs at home. And so he just, goes on autopilot. Kansas State is really, really, really good this year. I think Kansas State is probably, I think literally on the betting odds, they're either the favorite or the second favorite to win the Big 12. That team is just good everywhere. I don't know if they're great anywhere, but they are good everywhere. Dylan Edwards is going to score 2 touchdowns. I'm going to throw up in my shoes. I don't really have any hard feelings, but it's just, it feels like that's always what happens for the Coach Prime fans that are now here. I'm just telling you, that's just how it has to be. It's guaranteed going to happen. Like Brennan Rice, scoring against us, probably it felt like 100 times.
Christian Gonzalez getting 2 picks.
God, that one hurt. But Kansas State's really good. It's not that I think Colorado's bad. I know that it's at home. I think we have a chance in the game. I just think Kansas State is really, really good. I think it's just a loss because we're up against a team that's just better than us. I really think that.
Yeah, this was a heart pick over head pick for me. I think that Kansas State's tough too. Last year, so as Chase referenced, last year I was super bullish on the Buffs at home, and my entire preseason picks last year were derailed by how atrocious the trench play was. I mean, I genuinely still believe that is what prevented us from winning 8-9 games, right? Like it was that bad. It was that, and we've seen so much bad offensive line play here, and it was somehow actually worse. And against a team like Kansas State, that's going to destroy you. I don't know if y'all know this. Chris Kleeman was the head coach at North Dakota State. So he knows how to build a program from the ground up, and he builds from the inside out, right? I know Prime talks about building from the outside in, getting all the skill position, but when it comes to building like a sustainable model to win year in, year out and have a consistently good program, we've seen over the course of time that building from the inside out is consistently the way that it goes. And they get those corn-fed guys out there in Kansas State. So that'll be a tough one. But man, going back to what I was saying though, Folsom magic is real. Like we kept all those games close last year, even in matchups that we shouldn't have, right? Like Arizona turned out to be really, really good, and we had them on the ropes. Like we really should have won that game. The Stanford game was just an absolute anomaly. that is honestly, I'm convinced that was one of the reasons why Sean Lewis got demoted, because that absolutely atrocious game calling in the second half. I don't know. I don't care if anyone else had an influence over that. Like, you're the offensive coordinator, you're the play caller. Like, you have to make the right play calls there, and that was just flat out atrocious. To allow a team that's losing 29-0, that has a major talent discrepancy, to just completely walk all over you. And then Oregon State game, we were in that game too. Like, Oregon State was way better than we were last year across, other than a handful of positions, especially in those trench areas. And we kept it within a score, and we had a shot. And you could see it just from how well we played, like, down 3 scores, because as soon as you go down 3 scores, they're not blitzing anymore, and now Shedeur has a little bit of time. That's all it took. So I believe in the Folsom magic, and I think that we're going to see it this year, even with marginally improved offensive line play.
Just really quickly, Kansas State has one of, if not the best defensive lines in all of college football, but definitely probably the best one other than Utah in the Big 12. So that's going to be a really big test for our new and improved O-line. And Shedeur is going to have to be quick, because they're good on both lines, and they are a run the ball first kind of offense. And I don't know. I think it's going to be punished. It's just a bad matchup as well.
Yeah, I had the same thoughts. Kansas State is a very tough matchup. They were number 2 in the Big 12 preseason poll. I think a lot of them are picking Kansas State to win the Big 12. Very talented team in the trenches, and you have that shifty Dylan Edwards, who's more shifty when your O-line is very solid. So I'm nervous for that. Be interesting to see what the chatter is before the game. I mean, Kansas State was one of our Big 12 rivals, so it'd be interesting to see if that's reignited in some way. But I think they're a tough matchup.
That's such a classic Big 8 matchup. It's going to remind me of being, like, in school again and going to those games. I remember, man, like, one of the most memorable games that I had as a freshman at CU was against Kansas State. And that's actually the one with the famous sunset over Folsom. I don't know if you guys have seen that Nat Geo pic, but that was actually the Kansas State game in 2008, where you had the yellow student section and all of that, and we beat an NFL quarterback. So Kansas State had a future Tampa Bay Bucks quarterback named Josh Freeman, and it was a slugfest. I feel like that game ended it was a hideous score, like 14-13 or something like that. But that was one of I believe it was one of the Tyler Hansen games, one of many. So it was good memories, and it'll be cool to see that happen again.
Sreyas is one of 5 people on earth that knows facts like that about Colorado football history, as far as where all the photos come from, and
we need to
who
get
the starting
Ted on.
quarterback for Kansas State in 2007 was. And
we got to get Ted. We got to get Ted on. It's been a hot minute. We got to get him on. He's definitely another one.
1 or 2. All right, moving on. Next game, we have Arizona, and this is the only game in which we all gave the Buffs a loss. 4 losses across the board. Again, the only game, not Kansas State, not Oklahoma State, not Utah. Arizona on the road was the only game we gave 4 losses across the board. I'll kick us off just because I've been a little quiet the last couple games, the last couple weeks. Arizona's a really good team, but what's funny is as I was thinking about this a little further, is I don't think they're a better team than they were last year. And we played them so well last year. We were in that ball game until the very end. But they just have 2 big playmakers in Fafita and McMillan. Those guys are studs, a great 1-2 punch, and they match up well against our Shedeur Travis 1-2 punch. I'd argue we have more than just a 1-2 punch. LeJontay Wester's obviously a stud. Will Shepherd, I can go on and on and on. But on the road, Arizona's a tough environment. I remember back in the day, I was talking to Michael Atkins. That's an old name for y'all. And he was saying his favorite road stadium was Arizona because it was one of the loudest stadiums he's played in. So I thought that was really interesting. I think it's going to be a tough road environment. I think Arizona is a really good team. I think they're a dark horse in the Big 12. But I also think they're slightly overrated. They have a new head coach. They lost a couple guys to the NFL. It'll be interesting to see how they turn out, but just with their leadership at quarterback, I think they're going to be tough to beat.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways, Arizona is what CSU wants to be this year, where you have a really good quarterback and a really good wide receiver. But in the case of Arizona, we saw them actually do it at the Power 5 level consistently, week in, week out, against some really top end NFL type talent. Not to say that Torrey Horton isn't going to be an NFL type guy, but we know Teterow and McMillan. We'll see about Fafita. He's a little undersized for the NFL, but man, he can really throw it. And he actually kind of struggled against CU last year, and it seemed like that was more on his side. I thought I saw guys getting open from my vantage point in that game, but he just wasn't hitting them. I don't expect that to happen at home for this team. But as Jake pointed out, new head coach, they did lose some guys to the transfer portal. You know, it wasn't as many as people were predicting when that Jed Fish to Washington news first broke. But that's still, it adds up, you know, it adds up. And so just like the CSU comparison, if maybe some of those guys that they replaced the transfers with don't end up being major contributors like what they had last year to a 10-win team, then maybe they're not as good as we're thinking. But it's hard to look at that on paper, especially on the road, and just say unequivocally it's a win, even if you think that CU is going to make it to the playoff.
Sam's not here, so I just have to say it. Last year, Sam's biggest reason that we would beat Arizona was because their coach's name of Jed Fish was really stupid. That no longer is holding Arizona back. So in fact, Jake says that they may have gotten worse. I think they've gotten better because they shed the stupid name of their former head coach. On a realistic sense, I think Arizona's going to win the Big 12. I've kind of come around to it. And what people maybe forget, and that we know because we've been going to Arizona fans are atrocious at basketball games. I don't think I have a least favorite fan on earth than Arizona fans, but in football games, they are somehow maybe even worse in the stands. And so I don't know. I was at the game last year in person. Those fans are obnoxious. They're awful, and they have no like history to be proud of. And that's the worst part, is like they run their mouths and have nothing to back it up with. And so, you know, I don't know. I have a problem with Arizona. That team's really good. The fact that they didn't lose that entire team to the transfer portal is insane to me. You know, shout out to Brennan for coming in and salvaging that. But I just think that's a really good team. Again, it's not that I think Colorado's not going to be competitive. It's just I think Arizona is that good, and I think it's hard to go on the road, win that game. It's going to be a hyped up game. Arizona fans in football are pretty fair weather, but they'll be there, and they'll be loud, and it's going to be a tough environment. I don't think Colorado fans are going to travel as well to that game because, you know, been there, done that. We've been traveling there for years. If you wanted to go, you would have gone. And I think people are going to save up their travel opportunities for the new Big 12 foes, that they're more excited for the nostalgia. I do think we're going to be traveling better on the road than we have the last few years. But it's just, that's a good team. It just is what it is. I wouldn't be surprised if we're competitive, but I think it's going to be really hard to outlast that team. They're also going to be pretty paper thin though. So injuries could really upset that team and slow them down. So who knows? That'll be a game that we'll have to reevaluate, you know, kind of later in the season when we get there.
All right, moving on. Next game, Cincinnati at home. We said this was the Buffs' easiest game on the schedule. Did we vote that way? We did. 4 wins across the board against Cincinnati. This is the family weekend game. Wear black theme. I'll go first real quick. I don't know a ton about Cincinnati. All I know is when we jumped on their podcast, the host was very bearish on his own football team.
I get it. Bearish.
So yeah, no pun intended there. But yeah, Cincinnati's picked lower on the end for the Big 12. But a lot of people are saying that about Colorado, and we're very bullish about Colorado. So you never know. But yeah, I think we're going to win this pretty handedly. What do you guys think?
This should have been the homecoming game, just for the record. This is clearly the homecoming game. It's an easy win. This is a must win. This is the equivalent of the Stanford game last year. Even Cincinnati fans know they're going to be atrocious. It's not a game that should be competitive. This should be a game that we win from start to finish. I think this is actually the easiest opponent on our schedule, period, throughout the entire season. We didn't say this on their podcast because we didn't want to hurt their feelings. That team's terrible. That team is like genuinely atrocious. And it's crazy how fast they picked a hell of a good time to be good and competitive so they could get an invite to the Big 12. That team looks like the Cincinnati of old. And there's nothing they can do I mean, they could win their first 4 games, and I would not believe that team's good. That team is just bad, top to bottom.
It is incredible how fast that happened, because they made it to the playoff with Ritter, right? Desmond Ritter. Is that who it was? Just a couple of years ago. that was like the 2021 season where they made the playoff and then got, blown out by Alabama as an undefeated team. But man, it happened fast. And of course, like when you lose a coach like Luke Fickell and he wanted to go Power 5, even though Cincinnati went Power 5 too, he could have stayed, but he wanted the bigger Big Ten job and went. And I think that probably has a big role in what happened there. I don't know a ton about them other than the fact that, again, everyone's been talking them down. We'll keep an eye on how it goes because we've been wrong about this before. Like, it's not unheard of to see a team that's picked lower, like CU this year could potentially be a team that was picked lower and then outperform expectations. So, but for now, this really have to win this one. This is a pretty important game for us.
Very critical for a bowl game. Next up, we have Texas Tech on the road. We have 2 wins and 2 losses. 2 wins, 1 win coming from Chase and Jake, 1 loss coming from Sreyas, and a loss coming from Topher. So we're pretty split on this one. Texas Tech has always been a solid team running that air raid. They recently picked up Josh Kelly, a transfer from Fresno State, who's an absolute stud at receiver. But here's the deal. We got a great secondary, and we're going to lock them up. Unless it's like that Stanford game and Travis Hunter's a little tired. So I think this is going to be a close game, but I think the Buffs will edge out Texas Tech. I don't think they're that talented of a team overall. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Topher and I hopped on their podcast, and it was kind of interesting learning from them because they are very optimistic about the path that the team is taking. They talk about how last year was a kind of a letdown season. I think people are probably sleeping on Texas Tech a little bit because people don't realize like how injured that team was. I think they lost their starting quarterback either before the season or very early in. They're going to have a decent running back. Like they're a talented team, but they're not on the top end of the Big 12. I don't think it's that good of a team. That should be a win where Colorado is just better on across the board. We have better players than they do. And there's no reason, I think that's at Lubbock. Is that right? Like there's no reason that we shouldn't be able to go into Lubbock and get that win. That's another area where all 300 people that live in Lubbock, probably 200 of them are Coach Prime fans. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a good Colorado representation. Hopefully no one that lives in Colorado is going to Lubbock for that game because I can't imagine a worse place on earth to subject yourself to. But
West Texas.
And I feel bad. They're great guys. No. And when they hop on the podcast, I hope everyone will forget what I said. But that should be a win. I think Texas Tech is going to be a little bit of they're my trendy pick where I think they're going to be better than people realize. But I just think that we're more talented than that team. And if you believe in Colorado as much as we do, to pick them to go 8-4, I think that's a game that we have to win to get a record like that.
Yeah, they were pretty close to having a really special season last year. They had some very, very close losses. The one that popped in my head first was that Wyoming loss. Wyoming turned out to be not terrible either. But man, like it got off to that kind of started their season off on a sour note, and then they almost beat Oregon. They played Oregon really tough, which I think gave some CU fans a little bit of hope going into that game, which probably shouldn't have in retrospect. But they played Oregon pretty close too. And then the Big 12 was very much a coin flip type conference other than Texas and Oklahoma really for the most part last year, although Oklahoma did get stunned by, I think BYU didn't they stun Oklahoma? Some team like beat Oklahoma that shouldn't have. But yeah, Texas Tech is part of the coin flip Big 12 for sure. I just we'll see about the road buffs. I get that last year we beat like the really bad teams that we were supposed to, like Arizona State. Actually, it was Arizona State the only road win that we had last year. Never mind. I think that was the only road win we had. So we didn't. Never mind. We didn't beat we didn't beat all the teams we were supposed to. Yeah, like there's just something about playing on the road, and this maybe just goes back to the generations of failure of watching CU football. It seems like they just generally are much worse on the road, and Texas Tech's probably going to be a decent enough team. Like I said, coin flip Big 12. So as with every one of these games, could totally go the other way. Maybe not Arizona. Arizona probably expecting a lot, But this could go the other way too. But we'll definitely see. I think probably they'll get us this time though.
All right. Next up, we're coming to the probably arguably the hardest stretch of the schedule with the last 3 games of the season. Very talented teams the Buffs are going against. Starting off with Utah. We have 3 losses and 1 win. Jake is the only win. And then Chase, Sreyas, and Topher are all a loss. Utah at home. This is the service game, salute to service, Native and Indigenous Peoples Heritage game. That was a mouthful. I'll go first because I'm the outlier here. I think the Buffs finally beat Utah. It's our time. We've been losing these guys. How many years in a row is it? I don't even know. It's too many. But we played them close last year, and here's the deal. I think we match up against Utah pretty well. They obviously have Cam Rising, who's a stud at quarterback, but their offensive line, they only returned 2 starters. And on the defensive side of the ball, their strength is in their secondary. So not on the defensive line. And I'm going to take Shador over any secondary. So I think we match up well against Utah. We're at home. We're going to be playing on a mission because I think at this point we'll string a couple of wins going into this game. And I can see the Buffs pulling this off. If there's any year we're going to beat Utah, I think it's this year. But yeah, I mean, Utah is number 1 in the Big 12 poll. They're obviously going to be a very tough opponent. But I just have a good feeling about this one, guys. I don't know.
Is this Cam Rising's 8th year? It's a 7th at least, right? Because
something like that. I think
I'm
it's
pretty
only
sure he played at
his
Texas.
3rd year as a starter.
He played at Texas before he even transferred to Utah.
I looked
and
it
then
up.
he had his
It's only
COVID year.
it's only his 6th year, but he is a player that will be playing who was born in the 1900s. So that's like crazy to think about these days.
Oh gosh, I feel old.
Yeah, man, stop. But they're talented, man. We'll see how the turnover goes. I guess Jake pointed out some attrition, but they always retool. Whittingham is so good at recruiting those DL guys, and they're especially good at getting the Polynesian representation because that's like it's recruiting hotbed for them. They always seem to have stud poly guys, and that is a tough matchup. Just like with Kansas State, my heart said maybe we'll beat Kansas State. Maybe that's more just like pre-existing coding from remembering that game from when I was a freshman. But Utah is really beating up on us. I am glad that we got them in 2016 when it mattered most for us. But other than that, and the one Embry game where we randomly beat them after their kicker missed a field goal, man, it's been rough sledding against that team. They're very talented, tough matchup for us.
Yeah, for me, it's just, I mean, Kyle Whittingham is, I hate to, he's just a better X's and O's coach than Coach Prime is. Love Coach Prime. This is not an anti-Coach Prime thing. I don't want to start Sreyas again on the coaching decision diatribe, but it's at home. We have a chance at home. Kyle Whittingham is just so good. The only thing I think that could happen is they play BYU the week before, and that is the season for Utah. That's the season. And I wonder if they get like a gutsy win against Utah at home, if they come to Colorado and get surprised. And I think that's going to require a lot of things to go in our direction. I think the weather has to be pristine on November 16 in Boulder because we have to be able to air it out because they are going to punish us on the running sides of the ball. And so they're just a better team. They're in a better spot than we are right now. They're our favorite to win the Big 12 for a reason. I want to see it so bad. I don't, this is just it. Cam Rising at 1,800,000 years old is just, I mean, he's awesome and he's coming back from an injury, who knows? But I just will not believe that we're going to beat Kyle Whittingham until I see it. And I want to say, maybe I'm crazy, Sreyas, you would know this. For some reason, I feel like Kyle Whittingham wasn't the coach in 2016. Like I'm trying to figure out how we possibly beat Kyle Whittingham. Like he must have had the original version of COVID or had been kidnapped or something. It's hard for me to imagine Mike McIntyre beating Kyle Whittingham, but I mean, I guess it's possible, but I mean, you got to give him respect. He's earned it. I think Utah's coming into the Big 12 ready to run the conference, and I won't be surprised if they do. I would love to win that game. I just don't see it.
we had a team that matched up well against them that year, right? We had a really good front seven. I remember that Olabode. We had Kenneth Olabode on the pod last year. I remember that fumble, scoop, and score to ice the game. And dude, Cepho was a absolute warrior. He just put his head down on the goal line and said, "I will not be denied," and just scored touchdowns that way. We didn't even need to run red zone plays. It was just QB, just drive it in, Sometimes he wouldn't even be driving it behind an offensive lineman. He would just go truck people, and that's a good matchup. I don't think we have a team quite built like that this year.
And 8 years later, that's the team we're celebrating because Utah is that good under Kyle Whittier.
We have the transfer though. I'm blanking.
Oh yeah,
the transfer quarterback,
Walter
the big
Taylor.
Dude. Yes,
Man,
thank you.
We'll see. We'll see about that. Walter Taylor at the spring game, at least. Maybe he's got.
Oh yeah, he was not good.
It was rough in the spring game.
Right.
We'll see. But 6'7" quarterback, so it could be a quiet weapon to use in those situations.
Yeah, Chase, you brought up a good point with BYU. Can you imagine if they lost that game, then playing CU next?
No, I am the biggest Utah fan that week because I do not want to play a pissed off Utah ready to prove a point against a flashy team oh boy, I just don't see it. I want to see it. I really, really want to see it. I just don't see it.
And don't forget why we kept it close against Utah last year. We didn't have Shedeur, right? I think who started? Was it Gavin Colt that started? No, it was
Staub, right?
Staub. It was Ryan Staub. That's right. Who? But man, they were. I'm pretty sure their starting quarterback wasn't even a quarterback. I think they threw the ball once or twice in the entire game.
And they beat us.
And they beat us.
Right. Cam Rising was in the ICU, and they beat us. Yeah, I don't.
All right.
I'm ready for the next one, please, Jake.
On that high note, next one.
By the way, this is Cam Rising's 7th season. By the way, I just looked it up. He redshirted, transferred, and then got a medical red shirt.
Bro needs to go work at State Farm already. He needs to pack it in. All right, next one. Kansas on the road. Very talented Big 12 team. We actually split this one. 2 losses, 2 wins. The losses are Jake and Sreyas, and the wins are Chase and Topher. What are you guys' thoughts?
I'm actually surprised that I have that as a win. I forgot that I put that as a win. That's probably a loss if I'm being totally honest. Kansas is a really good team. I think my rationale on that was, they're playing in Kansas City. Kansas is like, they're no longer they're not how Purdue in the Big Ten is like the giant slayer. That was really Kansas for a long time. The Big 12, it felt like. I regret. I'll stand by it now, but I don't know. Like that's a tough team to beat. That's a well-coached team. I do think, like a lot of these teams, we are more talented than them, pretty much at every position other than the Lions. But it's one of those, like, I think we're going to travel well for that game. I think we could win it. That was a hard pick by me for sure. I don't know. I was feeling inspired when I made that pick because when I saw it just now, I couldn't believe that I did it because I have not been looking at what my picks were. And I hate to be the Debbie Downer because you guys are both about to say we're going to lose that game. I wish Topher was here to lead the charge and inspire us, but I don't know what I was thinking on that.
I'll say this. The narrative for that game is going to be very, very, very interesting because there is no one in their right mind that would argue that the situation that CU's been in for the last 15 years or so was actually worse than Kansas. Kansas was on a completely different level. I actually went and looked it up. Between 2010 and 2020, they were 21 and 108, including 6-91 in Big 12 play. 6-91. Think about that. 6 wins out of 97 games.
But more importantly, 2 of those 6 were against Texas, I believe. So
they were. And so the narrative is going to be very interesting because when Leipold came in, right, they were literally at the bottom. Like there's nothing below Kansas. Kansas might have even been like the worst program period, G5, FCS, everything, right? It was that bad. It was on a completely different level. And he came in and he struggled. His team struggled for the first like 9 games of the season. They started off 1-8, I believe, and then they had that huge upset against Texas at Texas, and they played a couple close games to end the season. Ended up 2-10, which no one would bat an eye about. Be like, that's still a terrible season, blah blah blah. But the building blocks were there because they came in the next season, and then boom, they were bowl eligible just like that. Last year they won 9 games. They're on the up. Like this is a real college football success story. And I think that the narrative coming into that game, especially if CU's doing well and Kansas is also doing well, is going to be this is like 2 different styles of rebuilding from the bottom. And Kansas unequivocally started from a lower spot. No one would ever argue different. Like that, where Kansas was is the depths of hell, the likes of which that no college football fan should ever experience. And here we are. Like, we have one team that rebuilt with, flashy transfers and all the media attention and all the hype and all of that. And you have another, team that's maybe like a year ahead of schedule compared to CU that rebuilt from the ground floor, like with just regular recruiting, a couple key transfers here and there. And now they're matched up as conference foes. That's going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, Kansas is very talented. Like, they just have to stay healthy. Because the last couple of years they lost their starting QB. His name is escaping.
Jalen
Daniels.
Jalen Daniels. They lost him, and they had to play Bean. And Bean was a serviceable quarterback, but he's not going to go win you games like Daniels does. And so, like if they're healthy going into that game, being on the road, the time I remember vividly Kansas playing at Arrowhead was classic Kansas Missouri matchup. That was basically a de facto playoff game because the winner would go to the basically the Big 12 championship game and then have the opportunity to potentially play in the BCS national championship game. Crazy, right? Kansas was almost in the national championship game, like what, 2007? It wasn't even like a lifetime ago in the grand scheme of things. It wasn't like 50 years ago. But that environment, I think the environment's going to be really good. I do expect that the NFL fans will be into that game and they'll probably show up. Obviously the Chiefs play there, so it's already kind of got that environment going for it. But yeah, I would be surprised if CU pulled that one out just from all of that narrative spinning and the circumstances. But we'll see.
Yeah, too bad we don't have Topher here to talk about the win side, but I think I'm going to talk about it a little bit. I think this game's a toss-up, and I'm going to share why I think CU can win. More so, I actually want to talk about why it's going to be a very interesting matchup, mainly on the defensive side of the ball. Kansas is going to go toe-to-toe with CU in the best secondary in the Big 12. You got Kobe Bryant, Mello, I'm blanking on his last name, corners for this Kansas secondary, and they're really phenomenal players. I remember briefly there was rumors of Kobe Bryant coming to CU, and man, I wish those rumors were true because he's a really talented player. But Kansas also lost a lot of talent. They lost their 2 best defensive linemen as well as their star linebacker from last year. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup because we're going to see how good is Shedeur Sanders, how good is Shedeur against a really good secondary. And it's also very interesting because we're going to see how good is our run game. That's the weakness with this Kansas defense. And at this point, will we have established the run? Are we going to be able to run the ball in Kansas and then pick apart the defense, maybe underneath on the throws? I don't know, but it's going to be a really interesting game to see how the offensive play calling goes on this one. But I think it can go back and forth. I obviously put a loss. Don't have good memories in Arrowhead being a Broncos fan, so we'll see how it goes.
And really quickly, Jalen Daniels is without a doubt, or at least in my opinion, the best. Well, I don't know, Arizona maybe, but probably the best quarterback that Colorado will face. And if he was a little bit taller, like we could be watching 2 NFL quarterbacks slugging it out. Who knows? The NFL's kind of changed. Jalen Daniels is the type of player that they want in the NFL. He's only 6 feet tall, or maybe not even 6 feet tall, but that is going to be a really fun game to watch as far as just pure quarterback play, because if those guys are both healthy, they're both playmakers, they're both lights out, they can both do things that you just won't believe. And so I'm excited for that game. It'll be cool watching it in Arrowhead where Patrick Mahomes plays all the time, obviously, and I'm excited for it. I don't know, I'll own the win. I'm excited. I'm predicting the win, just not in my heart. Maybe my brain believes that one more than my heart. I don't know.
All right, last game. Home game. Oklahoma State, another Big 12 rival. They obviously have Oklahoma going to the SEC, so this might be a little rivalry budding. Who knows?
It's
Last
another
game,
Big 8, another Big 8 game.
another Big 8 team. We might be playing for something at the end here. But we have, surprisingly, 3 wins and 1 loss. Chase is the sole loss for Oklahoma State at home at senior day. Sreyas, myself, and Topher all gave this one a win for the Buffs. What do you guys think? Chase, do you want to...
that 10 a.m. kick official? That's got to be.
Yeah, it is.
Is that Eastern? Is that really 10 a.m. Mountain time?
Yeah, Mountain. Yep.
Oh my God.
Yep.
Oh my God, that's atrocious. So first of all, anyone who went to the Alamo Bowl, and I would imagine people who listen to this podcast, a good number of them actually went to that Alamo Bowl.
Podcast loves talking about the Alamo Bowl.
That was one of the worst
experiences.
That was one of the worst experiences of my entire life. And Oklahoma State absolutely nuked us. Their fans were atrocious. They do the stupid thing with the clapper or whatever it is. The guns. Oh my God. Their mascot is definitively the worst in college football, maybe in sports, period. It's atrocious. And anyone who stands up for it is lying to themselves.
But we're gonna lose to them.
Yeah, we're gonna lose. I mean, I think they're going into the next season top 25. I think they're like 17 or 18. And Mike Gundy's a great coach. That is a very good team. That is a team that I think is a matchup nightmare for us as far as I think they're going to be deep. I think they're going to be a team that can withstand injuries better than we can. That might be an interesting game because it is entirely possible that we could go into that game 5-6, and that could be a prove it game. And it could be Shador's last dance in Folsom. It'll definitely be Shador and Travis's last dance in Folsom. And I think we're going to want that game. I hate the fact that it's at 10 a.m. I mean, that's just atrocious. I will be going to that game for sure. I'll be at that game.
Black Friday.
Right after Thanksgiving. Yeah. And I think that team is really good. I don't give us the Folsom magic. I am hopeful that our team is competitive enough where that game matters. And I'm excited. I think a rivalry could be there. Oklahoma State has no natural rival anymore in the Big 12. We are begging for a rival that we can actually hate because Utah just never got there for us. And if we're being honest, Nebraska's never coming home back to the Big 12. So I would love to hate Oklahoma State. I already hate Oklahoma State. I hate their fans. I hate what they did to us. I hate that they ruined our only bowl game that I have been to personally, and the only one that we've been to in like 15 years. So that game is personal for me. Unfortunately, I think that one's a loss. I think that one is probably an ugly loss. I'm saying it now. There's a lot of football to be played. We'll see. I think that is where the wheels are going to fall off because we just don't have the depth to survive that late in the season. And after having to play Utah at home, at Kansas, it's hard for me to imagine that we're going to be healthy and in a place where we can compete. So there's the negative aspect. I think Sreyas should go next because he'll be balanced, and then Jake is going to sing from the rafters how amazing that game will be.
I don't think your rationale is wrong. I think that there's a good chance that we'll be beat up for that game at the end of the season. And I don't expect that getting hyped for that game is going to be a problem. I think that at that point, we'll either be fighting for, we could be fighting for a berth in the Big 12 championship game. We'll be fighting for what bowl we go to. We'll be fighting to get into a bowl, right? I think that all those things should be on the table at that point in the season. Oklahoma State is interesting. They're very interesting because, like, throughout Gundy's time at Oklahoma State, they've been very, very good overall. But, man, they have some weird letdown games. And last year, they made it to the Big 12 championship, and they got absolutely destroyed by UCF when UCF was down. They got absolutely destroyed by South Alabama, right? And this shows you what a coin flip the Big 12 is. The rest of their games were relatively close, other than Cincinnati. Cincinnati was really bad, and they got their butts kicked by Oklahoma State. But the rest of the games are fairly close, like kind of coin flip type games, and Oklahoma State just found a way. Oftentimes they had one of the more talented players, one of the more talented running backs that in the conference, if not in the country. And Ollie Gordon, I know Ollie had some issues with the law or something this offseason, but it sounds like he's still going to play. So which is good for, I mean, it's good for their football team for sure. And good running backs have a way of, like, historically at least, running over CU, especially for front seven, is not substantially improved from where it was last year. But they have these weird letdown games. And so I want to combine the weird letdown game with the Folsom Magic, and then CU playing for. I can't imagine CU not being hyped for that game unless they're going in absolutely atrocious or not playing for anything because maybe they've already gotten to the Big 12 championship game or something like that. I imagine
Shedeur has a broken back because we can't block.
Yeah. There'd be, it would have to take some unique circumstances for us to not be up for that game. And if we are 5-6 going into that game, I expect that the fans will be super hyped because I understand that there's a segment of fans, like CU fans, that are still like adjusting to what it's like being a CU fan and seeing like that disappointment. But the idea of being bowl eligible and that kind of, a lot of people have set that as the bare minimum benchmark for the season. If we're fighting for that, that game is going to be very emotional. If we win that game in that scenario and go to 6-6 and get into a bowl game, I fully expect a field rushing, but not just a normal field rushing. It's going to be like one of those emotional field rushings. Basically, you know that meme where the guy is like spraying champagne on everyone and going crazy and throwing up middle fingers. And then they find out that he's on the third place podium. And then the first place and second place are going to be looking at him. That meme right there is going to be CU. Like we will go hard for it because we're so desperate for that like next step, right? We want that next step to get into a bowl game. And I understand like when you have all-American talent like Travis Hunter, possible top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and Shedeur Sanders, we'll say likely top 10 pick in the NFL draft, Shedeur Sanders, that you want something a little bit more than that. But man, that would be so huge. Like if nothing else, getting into that bowl game. I don't expect to be fighting for bowl eligibility, but if we are, that is going to be huge. You'll see them get up for it, and I expect us to get it done.
All right, now my rah. We're going to destroy Oklahoma State, I guess. Chase just gets me fired up. I wasn't going to be all in, but now I am. Ollie Gordon's going to get hurt. This is Travis Hunter's last game ever in college football. Shedeur Sanders' last game. Coach Prime's last game. Coaching his son. Shiloh's last game. This is going to be...
in the regular season, hopefully.
Yeah.
Good caveat. Thank you. Last game in Folsom? Maybe not. If we make the playoff, we could host.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, I don't know. Oklahoma State's a really good team. As I was looking at the preview for them, there's no holes. The preview is basically like, as good as the run game is with Ollie Gordon, their wide receiver core might be better. So it's going to be a tough matchup, but I'm with Sreyas and Folsom Magic. It's the last game of the season. Senior day, I think it's going to be, I don't know. This is my gut saying a win for this one. But yeah, so to flip up the entire win-loss season prediction, so I guess our real average is 8 wins, which I think is actually the consensus among Buff fans. So hit that over if you're betting. That's not real betting advice. Don't sue me if you lose.
Well, really quickly, let me just mention. So the odds on over 5.5 wins are a favorite at -128, but what is interesting is those have moved substantially. So originally over 5.5 was -160. So Vegas has gotten colder on Colorado the closer we've gotten to kick off for the season. I will make that betting advice. I'm going to hammer that line. I love that line. I think 5.5 is just not enough in a Big 12 that is totally coin flip city. But it is interesting that Vegas has gotten colder on us the closer we get to kickoff when, we haven't knock on wood, geez, but we haven't really sustained any injuries in camp, and like the line seems to really be gelling and things are really moving in the right direction. I feel like we have some more clarity on coaching. So I just don't see why we went from -160 to be over 5.5. I get that the line's not going to move down, down or up from 5.5, but it is interesting that that's moved, especially because, as you mentioned, Colorado fans, it does seem like we've done a few polls on it. 8 out of 12 is pretty much the expectation.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I wonder if that's more of a product of people expecting the Big 12 to be better than what maybe they were thinking at the end of last season. And then I wonder if the other factors were not playing the two, I think, consensus worst teams in the Big 12 in Houston and Arizona State. I think those two factors could potentially be playing a role here. Maybe.
I also think the public is hate betting against Colorado. I think that's part of it. There's just a lot of people who hate Deion Sanders, and they're putting money on it on the under.
Isn't CU like the most bet team on to win the national championship or something like that?
Yeah, and
make
like
the
things like that
playoff?
will happen because people are fans, right? But like the people will bet the unders on that because you can't bet an under on a championship future. And so I do wonder if people are just, the people that are negative are moving the lines. It's hard for me to imagine that like big Vegas money has a strong sense because the Big 12 is just so up in the air. You've got new teams coming
flip.
in, you've got
Everything's
teams leaving. And so it's hard for me to believe that like, big deep books are moving those lines. It does feel like maybe it could just be haters that are fading the buffs. And I don't know, I love it. If they continue to make the odds better, I will continue hitting it. You should not sports bet. It's not financial advice by any means, but it is an interesting perspective just because Colorado fans clearly are more optimistic, and they should be. They always are going to be, but so optimistic that we managed to calculate an average of 11 wins, even though no one guessed over 9. But
dude, just fix that formula. It's gonna take like 2 seconds to do, man.
I'm just gonna keep it just to bother you there, buddy.
Equals average.
It's actually just
I won. Like,
one other thing to note is Topher was the only guy that had us playing the Big 12 championship, and I did confirm that was not a mistake. He's like, yeah, I'm calling wins versus Kansas State, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. We're gonna sneak into that championship game, and the Buffs are gonna win it. So just want to call that out for Topher. I did not ask him how many playoff games we would win in that instance. But yeah, to your point, Sreyas, if they can pull together some Big 12 wins, Buffs can make the playoff. I don't think that's out of reach, especially with this team being 8 wins. All you got to do is win the Big 12 and you're in. And that would just be magical.
I do think the problem on that, you got to have 7 wins in the Big 12, I think, to make the Big 12 championship. There's too many teams in there, it's there's some really good teams out there and they might beat up on each other. But to make the Big 12 championship, if we only get 7, we're going to have to beat the teams that we need to, to get over. So we're going to have to beat Kansas. We're going to have to beat Arizona. We're going to have to beat, Oklahoma State in order to get there. And I don't know. I don't know. Sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Could you imagine if the Big 12 this year as an entire conference looks like what the Big 12 North used to be? Like towards the end of our time being in the Big 12, where you have like Missouri, Nebraska, CU, Iowa State, all just like total battle of attrition, absolute battle of attrition, where they're just beating up on each other. And then the winner of the representative from the Big 12 North to the Big 12 championship game is like 4-4 in conference, like barely gets it. And then they play against like some elite team in the Big 12 championship game and lose 70-3, except now this is the whole conference. That would be really funny. Like in the first year of the college football playoff, after everyone's saying like, we need the Power 5 to have every Power 5 conference or Power 4 conference needs representation. We have to get them in. And then all of a sudden you have the Big 12 that's just like 8-4 teams, like up and down. Everyone's 8-4 or 7-5, and then it comes down to the last week where there's absolute chaos, and it comes down to tiebreakers on who makes it into the Big 12. I would love that.
But unlike the former system, you're guaranteed to be in, right? So you don't have to worry about the Pac-12 eating itself all the time. Right?
I love that.
It doesn't matter in the Big 12, and they're probably, frankly, going to change how the playoff works here shortly. But while it's this way, it definitely benefits the Big 12 and.
Yeah, it's an auto bid, right? It's really nice having the auto bid because your season is like you're still playing for like the biggest prize out there, even if you have some weird random loss in September, right? You won't have a situation now where Alabama never schedules tough opponents in September, so that's a terrible example. But I'm just saying, like some top SEC team playing against like another really good like Big Ten team, for example. And then the entire stakes of whether you make the playoff is hinging on this game on September 2nd. And if you lose that game, it's a stain on your entire season, and you're probably not going to make the playoff no matter what you do after that. I love that that's not a thing. I actually like the fact that it's devaluing those like early season games when your team hasn't figured it out, because oftentimes that's not representative of the best teams at the end of the season. I mean, shoot, we saw that with CU last year. We came in riding hot into two rivalry games, and then one like playing against the team that came in second place the year before that, and we beat them all. And I think scrutinizing deeper the performances there, we all kind of saw the cracks, especially after the CSU game. And then the rest of the season was kind of closer to what some of the other pundits were expecting, although we did keep the games closer and we did clearly improve year over year. So devaluing some of those non-conference games, I'm fine with personally, because now those conference games matter so much more. And then you know that you have a seat at the table if you get it done. And the dream would be someday having a team like a Cinderella story where they started off 0-3 in non-conference and had some weird FCS loss. And then it's a down year for their conference, and they find a way to like make it as the second seed, right, into the Big 12 or the whatever conference championship game. And then they upset the favorite, who is the first seed, and they go to the playoff and they have all this momentum. And then they win win on the road, like on the on-campus game against like a higher. How sick would that be? That would be so cool. That's not something that really happens at that level, at that high stakes in college football. I would love that.
I wish
I'm
I
not
could
saying
cheer for
CU's gonna
that
be there.
exact thing to happen to Colorado, except I would rather beat Nebraska and Colorado State, I think, than have that happen.
Would you? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I would. I just, the idea of having to not being able to throw the 5,000
But the
number in front of
playoff,
Nebraska
though, to
fans,
go to
I
the
don't care.
playoff,
I don't
I
care.
Think
don't know.
about how insane that narrative would be, though. After the first three games, like everyone's destroying CU, like they made a mistake. They should fire Prime right now so they can rebuild and salvage their season. And then all of a sudden they come all like that's the season that gets a movie after that.
Nah,
100%.
I like Chase's narrative starting off 5-0. Everyone's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, Colorado's the real deal."
Game
Here we
day comes
go.
back to Boulder. People are ready to turn off their TVs. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair. I would prefer that too. I'm just saying
I'm
like that, but the new playoff system allows for that, like
Yeah.
like true Cinderella, and that's an amazing thought. I would love that.
Oh man, Sreyas is cheering for North Dakota State. Breaking news. I miss Sreyas's rants, but I know we were going to cover more topics, but we're running out of time, so I think we're going to have to film a part 2 at some point. But thanks for listening. There's our season preview, and we're going to take a deeper dive again before the season, go through the position groups, go through the players. Again, a lot of new players this year, a lot to be excited about. I mean, we're all very optimistic. Again, average of 8 wins. Sreyas is the lowest at 7. 7 wins would be great for this team. Great improvement. So yeah, it's been great to come back on. Check us out on YouTube, X, Instagram, Spotify, iTunes. Check us out on all those things. Just be really nice and just help us out. Thanks for listening. Let's go Buffs.
Let's go Buffs, baby.
Still Buffs.